Hello and welcome to Spardha Lines, your one-stop destination for the civil services preparation, UPSC, KPSC and other relevant examinations. We will take up some of the important articles that are in Hindu newspaper which are important both from pre as well as your mains examination perspective. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article here is speaking about environment and ecology perspective article. What are we speaking about? We are speaking about the global Stocktake report. This report is very important from the perspective of your GS paper 3 environment and ecology. What does it speak about? We have the 2015 Paris Agreement that took place. According to the Paris Agreement that took place, what they also have is called as the Global Stocktake Report. It is this Global Stocktake Report, synthesis report that we are speaking of. What is this synthesis report? We have the Global Stocktake Report and an idea about it, the long lengthy report, a shorthand and a summary form of it will be given in the form of the synthesis report. So what is the synthesis report? We have the Global Stocktake Report, which happens to be a long lengthy report. So summarizing it, simplifying it and only give those important pointers to the policymakers so that they would be able to understand the summary of it is what is called as the synthesis report. So taking the inputs and the perspective from the Global Stocktake report and ultimately summarizing it is the synthesis report. Now the question is, this synthesis report is about summary of the Global Stocktake report. What is this Global Stocktake report or the GST report that we are speaking of? When it comes to the GST report, what we have to go back is to the year 2015. In the year 2015, we had the Paris Agreement that came into picture. The Paris Agreement wanted to reduce the climate change manifestations that were taking place in order to make sure that we do not have the impact of the warming of the earth. We have seen in the last 100 years and 200 years or so, ever since the industrial revolution has taken place, there is increase in the global warming temperature as well. This has to be kept under 2 degrees by the end of the century, which means to say that we are supposed to control the global warming temperature by about 2 degrees centigrade by the year 2100, or if this cannot be maintained and sustained, at least 1.5 degrees centigrade is what we have to maintain so that the warming does not escalate. As this warming escalates, this could lead to massive ramifications around the climate change front. In order to reduce it, what we had was the Paris Agreement. In Paris Agreement, in order to fight the climate change issues, we have something called as the nationally determined contributions. What are these nationally determined contributions? As the very name denotes, it is nationally determined contributions, which mean to say that every country will be given on a voluntary basis, that all these countries will have to come up with their own plans, schemes and policies to reduce the greenhouse gases and also reduce the temperature from escalating beyond this 2 degrees centigrade. So let's say we have India. India on a voluntary basis will promise the world, that is, it is voluntary. Mind you, it is not binding, it is just a voluntary one. Let's say for example, if you look at Kyoto Protocol and any other protocols of 1977 and subsequently after that, some of them were binding in nature. So countries will have to do so and so by so and so year. There were some binding agreements. But when it comes to the nationally determined contributions, these are not binding in nature, which means to say they are voluntary in nature. So countries will decide on their own on the resources that they have got and also from the funding that the developed countries have been giving over a period of time, the measures that they have to take up. For example, let's say with respect to India, we have the nationally determined contributions where the country decides by so and so year, by the year 2050, by the year 2070, by 2100 or by 2030, we will reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by so and so amount. For example, in the year 2023 for now, we might be releasing carbon emissions. This might be about, let's say hypothetically, about 1000 tons. So by the year 2030, we will reduce the carbon emissions by about 50 tons. We will reduce the carbon emissions by about 20 tons from the baseline. So from 2020 or from 2023, we compare that, and for the year 2030, we're gonna say that we're gonna reduce the carbon greenhouse gas emissions from the prescribed year. So this is a voluntary promise that a country makes, that we will be reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. In order to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, what they are supposed to do is, let's say we are shifting to the renewable energy sector. We're gonna make sure that there are wind plants, there are also solar plants as well. So we are going to shift from the fossil fuel, we are going to shift from the non-renewable energy sector to the renewable energy sector through various schemes and mechanisms. We're going to also push what is called as the afforestation. The deforestation that has been taking place in the country will be reduced over a period of time. We will also issue carbon emission certificates as well. What are these carbon emission certificates? Let's say, for example, there is a company A. If this particular company A is transacting and it is emitting a lot of gases, so let's say this particular company has been prescribed one, let's say the carbon emissions that this particular company is only, they would be able to release about 100 tons, hypothetical example. So this particular company is not able to upkeep itself and is not able to keep within this 100 tons of carbon emissions. So there is another company B. This particular company also has about 100 tons of carbon that it will be able to release. So what does it do? But it does not release 100 tons of carbon for that particular year. So there is exchange certificate. So company B would say that I have released only 50 tons of carbon. There is another 50 tons of carbon that is left over for this year. So I'm going to give you this certificate. So apart from this, there are technological upgrades that can come up as well. Let's say for the carbon emissions, we have the fossil fuel industry. For example, you have the cars, internal combustion engines with the electric vehicles. So many other measures that a country would want to come up with so that it can reduce and upkeep within this 2 degrees centigrade by the year 2100. So all these promises that were made, voluntary promises, they are not binding, mind you. So they are not binding under the Paris Agreement. So every 5 years, what they will come up with is called as the Global Stocktake Report. What is this Global Stocktake Report? Basically, that for the past 5 years, we have done so and so steps. We have taken so and so steps. So these steps is to be monitored. So every now and then they're gonna monitor whether they are able to make sure that they are able to sustain the tempo, they are able to upkeep with the monitoring mechanism. That is what is called as Global Stocktake Report. So what is this report all about? It would not go about how much, but it will read about what needs to be done. So there is a mechanism that has been put in place. There is a mechanism to understand that these are the nationally determined contributions that we have given ourselves. So how are we going to monitor it? We've already taken certain steps. What else are the other steps that needs to be taken? That is what would be given under the Global Stocktake Report. So this particular report currently goes on to speak about that we have measures that we have taken. Is it enough? How are we going to monitor it? Is the Global Stocktake Report, which means to say there are measures that we have taken, and how are we going to monitor it? How are we going to change it? How are we going to rationalize it? How are we going to bring a massive change? Is what is this Global Stocktake Report. So measures will be monitored, and what measures can be changed will be taken as part of the Global Stocktake Report. Why are we discussing about it? Recently, we have the United Nations, which has released the synthesis report of the years from 2015. So according to it, what this report, synthesis report, goes on to say that whatever efforts have been made till date are not enough, says the synthesis report. Every country, for example, India, China, United States of America, European Union, they're all taking measures. Despite taking the efforts, these measures are still not enough to keep within 2 degrees centigrade by the year 2100. In fact, if we are not able to decrease by 2 degrees centigrade, at least 1.5 degrees centigrade. So the measures that they have taken is not enough, says this article. So what are we supposed to do? So this article currently goes on to say that we can go ahead with some of the measures. Let's say, for example, you don't have to go through this article. Use your common sense and you will understand what they are trying to say. So what are the measures that you would take? Let's leave this article, whatever it says, but let's apply our logic into picture. What is a major problem? The major problem is industrial activities. So the industrial activities that are taking place are also consuming energy. The consumption of energy is via the production of power. So what are the ways of production of power? One is coal, the other is hydropower, then there is nuclear energy, then there is renewable energy as well. So shifting from the non-renewable energy to the renewable energy sector, that happens to be one of the programs. So what we have to do is immediately shift towards the renewable energy. That is one of the measures. Added to it, there are large scale emission of the greenhouse gases. So how do we reduce it? One, by use of the public transport. The other is by the mechanisms to move from the that is the internal combustion engine, where they make use of petrol and diesels, to what is called as the battery based ones, EV, electric vehicles. This is another one. Let's say for example, we have deforestation that is taking place in couple of countries world over. This deforestation should be replaced with afforestation. This is another ways and the means, and the pollution that we are releasing into the market will also have to be reduced. So this report, the synthesis report, basically highlights about the global stocktake report. So what is the measures that have been taken, a monitoring mechanism that needs to be there. So they have picked up that for the few years for now, we have countries which have taken measures, but these measures are yet not enough, is what is the synthesis report. So and it goes on to say that we have to take the measures. The measures is about renewable energy, deforestation and land degradation reduction. It is about more ambitions to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. It is about transition to the new ways and technology. So these are some of the measures that have to be taken. So to bring in all these measures, what we require is the finances. So the global community right now will require a lot of finances, and these finances will have to come from the developed countries to the developing countries, is one other mechanism. It is this that we have to understand with respect to the global stocktake report. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about protecting floodplains is the need of the hour. What is this article speaking about? The article here is speaking about the floodplains. What are these floodplains? Let's say for example, there is a river. This particular river, it is flowing in a particular direction, and this is the river. So you have the water that flows in. So this is the river that is flowing in. So the region in and around it, let's say for example, let's say about 100 meters, or let's say for about 50 meters in and around from the path of the region, from the path of the river, is called as the floodplain. So you have the land that is in and around this particular river or the lake, that is what is called as the floodplain, which means that in case there is a flood that occurs in and around the river, even if there is extra water that comes out, what is the amount of land that is present in and around this river or the lake which is able to withstand the pressure, is what is called as the floodplain. Why are we discussing about it? That is because when you look at couple of countries world over as well as regions within India, what we are witnessing is the climate change vagaries. What are these climate change vagaries? One, what we are witnessing is excessive drought-like conditions, or it can also be heavy flood-like conditions as well. Drought-like conditions are being witnessed in couple of countries as well as states in the countries, and we are witnessing floods as well. There are few countries which are seeing lot of water, there is a lot of precipitation, there is a lot of rainfall, leading to increase of the floods. Yesterday in our daily current affairs, we did also discuss one such area that we saw, for example, with respect to the state of Libya. We also checked that in Libya there was floodgates that opened. Why? Because of storm Daniel. There was excessive case of...
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Yesterday, sorry for the interruption, there was some technical glitch here. And when it comes to yesterday, we did discuss about Storm Daniel as well, how there was excessive precipitation. There were 2 dams that were present in Derna in Libya. It opened up and it resulted in large number of people passing away. And within India, we have also seen floods taking place in major cities like Bengaluru, Mumbai and Chennai, Delhi as well. And we have also witnessed flash floods in the state of Uttarakhand as well as Himachal Pradesh. So whenever there is a lot of precipitation and rainfall, this could lead to floods in that particular region, and as a result, what this article focuses is on coming up with measures. What are these measures? First, the article goes on to say we have to move from reactive approach to the proactive approach. What is this reactive approach? Reactive approach is basically about flood protection, which basically means that when you look at couple of countries world over, and if you look at examples as well, what happens? It is a reactive approach. So there is a flood, we immediately come up with a mechanism to prevent the mechanism for the subsequent years. Instead of it, why not have a proactive approach? Proactive approach, which basically means even before the flood comes into the picture, what we can take are certain measures. It is these measures that the article focuses on. When you look into the data, what we have is the law currently in picture, which is the Disaster Management Act. The Disaster Management Act is the current law that we have in the picture to understand the disasters, and one such disaster happens to be the flood. So in case there is flood, what is the major issue right now? The major issue according to disaster management is, one, it was drafted in the year 2005. Maybe it would not have considered the vagaries of the climate change, and at the same time, it is not meant to deal with multi-hazard risks as well. So what are these multi-hazard risks? Whenever there is a flood, what are the types of issues that may occur was not decided in the Disaster Management Act. So to overcome this particular issue, the author goes on to say that instead of flood protection, what we can come up with is called as the flood management. So the article goes on to say that there is a shift in strategy of the flood control in countries such as Germany, United Kingdom and Netherlands to flood risk management as opposed to the flood protection. So what are the flood protection mechanisms? Let's say for example, there are conditions that are placed in couple of countries. For example, they lay the dikes, there are temporary flood defense walls as well as the polders. So whenever there is a mechanism to prevent floods, these conditions have to be met. What are these conditions? For example, in countries like United Kingdom, and for example, when there is a particular benchmark that is broken, they would come up with the walls. So there will be flood walls, there will also be other polders that are built. These are the protection measures. Apart from this, what we have to do is the management mechanism. So what is this management mechanism? That is to make sure that the floodplains are kept intact. As I discussed, let's say for example, if this is the river that is present, the plain, the region in and around it will have to be kept intact, and in case there is excessive floods, this plain region in and around the river or the lake, they would be able to take up the excessive water. But the major issue right now is these floodplains, which are supposed to have been safeguarded, are taken away by the land mafia. So what is happening in the present situation? There is a floodplain which has the capacity to withhold the water, but this capacity to withhold the water is being taken by the land grabbing agencies as well as other agencies. So in 2018 report, Comptroller and Auditor General of India attributed encroachments in the floodplains of the rivers of Tamil Nadu and failure to act on them as the primary reason for the Chennai floods. So there are these land lobby groups which take away the land, and as a result the floodplains are not present. So these encroachments will have to be prevented. For example, there is a public interest litigation that is filed in the High Court of Karnataka right now. It is called as a Citizens Action Group versus BBMP and State of Karnataka. So what exactly happened recently? As per there was a public interest litigation that was filed that large number of land encroachments have been taking place in and around the lake. So we have the BBMP which was made party to this particular case, and they were asked couple of questions by the Chief Justice of High Court of of Karnataka as well as the associate judge as well. So some of the recommendations that they have given, that is the BBMP have given, is that you will have the Tahsildars, you will also have the executive authorities of the BBMP which will have round the check. So what will they do? Let's say for example there is a lake. So this particular lake, a survey would be done. So a survey would be done about what would be this particular lake, what is the area around this particular lake, and a drone photograph of this lake would also be taken. So you will have the Tahsildars at the rural level, you will also have the BBMP authorities at the that is at the corporation level. What they will initially do is they will conduct a survey of it. So why am I linking that? Because whenever there is a lake or there is a river, what could happen? There will be illegal mining activities that they can take place. So for example, sand mining can also take place, mining activities can take place, and there are a couple of other tourism related projects that have taken place in Uttarakhand, so on and so forth. This is the major problem. So how do we reduce it? First, conduct a survey. So there is a lake, conduct a survey about this particular lake. What is the area that is present? So immediately after a survey is done, this has to be taken into the law books, and this after survey, what needs to be done in case there is an encroachment after survey. So you now have the data. So immediately after this, a survey has to be done. The survey will have to be taken into picture where they take the details of this particular lake or the river, and they also take the drone photographs of that lake. And in case there is encroachment or there is a likely encroachment, any public official, that is any public person, would be able to immediately come up with a photograph of it, or they can even put out the message to a official in that particular area. For example, in the rural level, it will be the Tahsildar, in the urban level, it will be the BBMP, so on and so forth. So a survey would be conducted. This would have the data about this particular lake as well as in and around the region around it. And if there is a person like me or a person like you who see that there is an encroachment that is happening in that particular locality, immediately draft a message, or there is an application that will be developed. So you can immediately take a photograph of it, and then you can go about and posting the message and write an email in that particular application. So after an application upload happens, the authorities would come up to it, they will take a measure of it and immediately take a survey once again. So they'll see if this particular image is right or wrong, they will do an analysis of it, and in case they do discover that there is an encroachment, then penal provisions will be immediately be enclosed on all such people who have come ahead with the encroachment. So what is the intent? The intent is to make sure that whatever is the original area of that river or the lake, the same is kept intact as well. So we have laws, we have rules, we have regulations. It is just on the paper. So how are we going to move beyond this? That is through the mechanisms of accountability, transparency. So how are we going to keep a check on it? So the BBMP in Bangalore has clarified that whenever there is a case that comes up before it, it will be a survey would be conducted within 7 days, and then whatever is the original land, the same will be kept as it is in an intact manner. So what are we focusing on? We are focusing on the proactive approach, which means to say there is a prescribed path for the lake or the river. In case there is any encroachments that happens whatsoever, the same is taken into the picture. So the author in this particular case goes on to say, rather than reactive approach, let's go ahead with proactive approach, which means to say let's conduct the surveys, let's have a statistics of it, let's make sure that the encroachment does not happen and the floodplains are kept intact, is what is this article all about. So there are floods that is taking place because of the climate change related aspects. So addressing this will require a proactive approach, says the author. There are many experiences around the world which point to the potential benefits of protecting and preserving ecosystems such as wetlands, forests, lakes and coastal areas in reducing the physical exposure to the natural habitats. So climate change adaptation is a cross-sectoral issue, and it involves laws relating to land use, preserving the water bodies, coastal regulations, environmental impact assessment. So it requires an integrated approach. So whenever you are making law with respect to the floodplains, it is not just one authority or the body or the institution. It will require the support from all the stakeholders, government, private as well as the civil society. Within the government as well, there are different departments. Let's say for example, with respect to Bengaluru, what we have is the BWSSB, then what you have is the Lake Development Authority, what you also have is the electricity board, you also have the BESCOM, so on and so forth. So there are different authorities which also step into the picture as well. So these authorities will also require coordination, so interdepartmental coordination, inter-ministry department coordination. So this will have to be taken into picture. Then you also have the civil society. Let's say for example, even if there are bureaucrats and the red tape which is in the slumber, you need the active participation of the people. These people ultimately report such encroachments, so the authorities can take relevant measures. So what we require is the assistance from all these bodies is the next course of action that has to be taken, is what is this article all about. So basically, proactive approach rather than reactive approach, prevention of encroachment. A survey should be conducted in every nook and corner. Take the original data, save it, and in case there is encroachment, people come up and put up their viewpoints on the application. Immediately the authorities will have to spring in, and all authorities will have to come together and they have to ensure that these kind of encroachments do not happen, is what is this article all about. Now let's look into the next article. This article says the complex path to biofuel sustainability. What is this article all about? The article here is speaking about the biofuels. Biofuels can be categorized into three types. What are these three types? One is what is called as the first generation. Second is what is called as the second generation. Third is what is called as the third generation. In the first generation, they make use of crops like corn and potato. In the second generation, they make use of food, straw and grasses. Third generation makes use of algae and food waste. These are the differences between the first generation, second generation and third generation. So you have the fossil fuels. To the fossil fuels, what we also make use of is these ethanol, so on and so forth. And this is the first generation, second generation and third generation. What exactly is the article speaking about? The article in the present situation goes on to say that we have the established mechanism. For example, we are planning to move from the internal combustion engine, that is fossil fuel based vehicles, to the electric vehicles. Let's say for example, we are shifting from the ICTs, that is based on fossil fuels, to let's say the electric vehicles. If we are shifting to the electric vehicles, there are again two issues. So we have one issue in the form of greenhouse gas emissions. This will have to be reduced over a period of time. So we are coming up with an alternative. What is the alternative? Electric vehicles. The electric vehicles will also have its own share of issues. What are these issues? One is with respect to what is called as the mining. Let's say when it comes to the electric vehicles, what we require is the critical minerals that is required. If we have to require these minerals, countries may not have these minerals. What is the requirement? So the requirement is we make the import from couple of other countries as well. So when we make the imports from other countries, what are the mechanisms that are employed by that country? What is the pollution that presents while we mine the data? And at the same time, we have to use the electric vehicles. So what are we doing? We have to charge the batteries. How are we producing the energy? When it comes to India, more than 50% right now is with respect to the coal. So what are we doing indirectly is we are burning the coal just to get the electricity for these power generations, which means to say that we are making use of the coal based power plant to run the EV vehicles. On one side, what is the mechanism to explore the minerals that could also create pollution as well, and at the same time we are making use of the electric vehicles. The electric vehicles are being charged by the electricity which is generated by the coal. So it has its own share of issues, and at the same time the author also brings into picture that if we are wishing to make through the biofuels or blending of the biofuels, that also has its own share of issues. What are the own share of issues? As we just discussed, we have the biofuels where there is a certain blending of first generation, second generation that happens. In India, biofuel is usually synonymous with first generation ethanol. What is this first generation ethanol? This is basically about food crops. For example, sugarcane crops, or for example, corn or potato, so on and so forth. As of now, every country, or in fact if we take the example of India, what we are is a surplus country. Surplus country, which means to say that we have enough crops, and as a result we are using it for an alternative in the form of surplus. So it is the surplus first generation crops that we are making use for the ethanol blending. But this has couple of issues. As of now, we might be a surplus country where we have extra food crops, but this is not the only issue. The issue is, in the near future there could be climate change variations. When there is climate change variations, we will have the same amount of land, but then people are urbanizing the country, people are converting the land into real estate buildings. Right now we are becoming a concrete jungle of late. We are selling off the land. Even if the land is as much as we have today, the amount of yield that we may generate with the same amount of land may also reduce because of the vagaries of the climate change. So on one side, today we are a crop excessive country, which means to say the yield is more, but over a period of time India's crop yield may drop. Why? Because the land may reduce, and at the same time the yield may reduce, keeping the climate change factors into the picture. Then the second reason the author goes on to say, a recent study led by the University of Michigan projected the rate of groundwater depletion could triple during 2040-81 compared with the current rate. So on one side the yield will reduce, the greenhouse gases will increase, the groundwater increase will not happen because there will be reduction in the groundwater. The amount of groundwater that we are using is far in excess, so we would not have the amount of water that is required, is the second major one. Third, the agriculture sector is one of the hardest to abate in terms of the direct greenhouse gas emissions. So increasing greenhouse gas emissions from this sector for motor fuel production in order to decrease greenhouse gas emissions from the transport sector is unnecessary. What does the author say? From the rice fields, we also know for the fact that a large amount of CH4 is released. CH4 basically is the methane. So in order to produce rice, in order to get rice, what we have is massive release of CH4 as well. So on one side, the agriculture sector itself will have a lot of release of the greenhouse gas emissions. For example, methane is one such example. So if we are increasing the production of crops in order to blend it with the fossil fuels, in order to make sure that the first generation ethanol is produced, we are increasing the crops, which indirectly also means we are increasing the greenhouse gas emissions. So there has to be a right balance amongst all these parameters, says the author. So basically there is always a trade-off. So we have the EV vehicles which are coming and replacing the internal combustion engine. So there are issues with that, and at the same time we are making use of the ethanol blending. The ethanol blending also has issues where India predominantly reserves its rights on the basis of the first generation techniques, which is the food crops, and if you are making use of the food crops for the blending with the fossil fuels, it has its own share of issues. One is with respect to the global warming, the yield will drop, the groundwater exploitation which is currently happening, that will also drop, the greenhouse gases will also increase. So there is a share of its own where there is a particular trade-off, and all of this will require the balancing, says this article. So basically managing these trade-offs is the need of the hour, is what is this article all about. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about International Day of Democracy. When is this International Day of Democracy celebrated? It is observed every year on September 15th. So the International Day of Democracy is celebrated around the world on 15th of September each year. It was established through a resolution passed by the United Nations General Assembly when, in the year 2007, encouraging governments to strengthen and consolidate democracy. The International Day is an opportunity to review the state of democracy around the world. It promotes inclusivity, it promotes measures to support the mechanisms of democracy, and also tell the people the importance of democracy world over. 2023 theme happens to be empowering the next generation, and this year's theme for the International Day of Democracy basically focuses on young people's essential role in advancing democracy, ensuring that their choices are included in the decisions that have a profound impact on their world. So this is celebrated every year on 15th of September. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about C-295. What is the context? We have a major revamp of the transport fleet. So the Indian Air Force has received the first C-295MW transport aircraft from Airbus. This will replace the aging Avro aircraft. What are the advantages, or what is the use of the C-295MW transport? This happens to be a transport aircraft of 5 to 10 capacity. It can carry as many as 71 troops or 49 paratroopers at a maximum cruise speed of 260 knots. It is designed to provide outstanding low-level flight characteristics for tactical missions, flying at speeds as low as 110 knots. The aircraft has a near ram door for quick reaction and paradrooping. What are the uses? One is it is a transport vehicle. It can be used as disaster management tool. It will be able to move people from one location to another. It can be used as evacuation. It is used for disaster management. So all these will be improved with respect to the C-29. So this C-295 will basically be provided in the flying conditions right now, and in the near future what we will have is the joint cooperation. So under the contract, 16 aircraft will come in the flyaway condition from Chevrolet, which will be manufactured by Airbus, and in the near future we will also have joint development with Tata Advanced Systems as well. These are some of the important parameters, and then all 56 aircraft will be installed with indigenous electronic warfare suite. The C-295 is empowered by two Pratt & Whitney Canada engines. It has short takeoff and landing characteristics and has the ability to use unprepared airstrips on medical evacuation. It can be fitted with 24 stretchers and 7 medical attendants. These are some of the important parameters with respect to C-295 transport aircraft. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about Ayushman Bhav health campaign. It is initiated by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare and happens to be a comprehensive nationwide healthcare initiative that aims to provide saturation coverage of healthcare services, reaching every village and town in the country. This groundbreaking initiative happens to be on the success of the Ayushman Bharat program. How does it work? It is a collaborative effort spearheaded by Gram Panchayats in coordination with the Department of Health, other government departments and local elected governments, where basically all of them come to ensure that individual receives essential health services without any disparity or the exclusion. It has three important parameters. What are those? One, it will have the Ayushman Aapke Dwar. It will also have Ayushman Melas, and last is the Ayushman Sabhas. This initiative aims to provide Ayushman cards to remaining eligible beneficiaries under the PMJAY scheme. Then you have Ayushman Melas, which will facilitate ABA IDs and issuance of Ayushman Bharat card. They will offer early diagnosis, comprehensive healthcare services, tele-consultation with specialists as well as appropriate referrals. And what we will have is rough sabhas. These are gatherings in every village and panchayat, which will make a pivotal role in distributing Ayushman cards, generating ABA IDs, raising awareness about vital health schemes and disease conditions such as non-communicable diseases, tuberculosis, sickle cell disease, as well as blood donation and organ donation types. So this basically is about health related awareness. What are the existing schemes that we have? What are the measures that have to be conducted, and the awareness that has to be given to the people in the country. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. So this is it for today. In case you are liking these initiatives, please do like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching. All the best.